A journalist from the pro-Clinton media outlet Slate wrote an article about Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders' poll numbers against Donald Trump, and it will be one of the most hilarious articles you will read, but unintentionally so. So in the article, it's laughably titled, "Polls Say Bernie Sanders is More Electable Than Hillary. Don't Believe Them," with the subtitle, "What They Really Show is a Candidate Who Hasn't Been Attacked." So I'm just curious, are you referencing the candidate who's been called a communist, who has been critiqued for not being a real Democrat, whose ideas are pie in the sky that will bankrupt the country? Is that the candidate you're referring to who hasn't been attacked? I'm just curious. In what world has Bernie Sanders not been attacked? Because throughout the past year on this podcast, I've been debunking false attacks against Bernie Sanders by everyone. The Democratic establishment, the mainstream media. See, unlike Hillary Clinton, even though she's under an FBI investigation, the media has not given her the scrutiny that she deserves. Also, she hasn't been attacked by her own party like Bernie Sanders has. I've actually debunked reports that claim Bernie Sanders is guilty of embezzlement because he pays family members to work for his campaign. I've also debunked misleading reports about the cost of his policy proposals. I refuted false claims from Hillary Clinton that claims Bernie Sanders is a sexist and a racist. And also, I've debunked claims stating that his supporters are sexist and racist, not just from the mainstream media, but from Bill Clinton himself. So yes, it's very much the case that Bernie Sanders has been attacked, and he's actually been held to a higher standard of scrutiny than Hillary Clinton, who's undergoing a criminal investigation by the FBI. And that's when they even want to cover him. Any coverage of Bernie Sanders is negative. So I find it hilarious that you think Bernie Sanders hasn't been attacked. It's just not true, and you're living in your own deluded reality. And furthermore, most of the attacks waged by Bernie Sanders against Hillary Clinton are just factual attacks. He points out that she's taking a lot of money from special interests. He points out that she won't release her paid speech transcripts to Goldman Sachs. She must be hiding something because otherwise, if you didn't, you would just release them. So, of course, it's the case that Bernie Sanders has been attacked. But I digress. Let's actually just get to the article and see what this journalist has to say. So, he states, "It's true that Sanders does better than Clinton in hypothetical matchups against the Republicans. Currently, Sanders outperforms Clinton by more than 7 percentage points against Trump and by nearly 9 points against Ted Cruz. But that's not because Sanders is the stronger nominee. It's because Republicans haven't yet trashed him the way they've trashed Clinton. Once they do, his advantage over her would disappear. A concerted attack on Sanders' weaknesses would hurt him badly in a general election." Okay, so the Republicans haven't attacked him yet. So, question. When Sean Hannity calls Bernie Sanders a communist and say that he's going to tax people at 98%, when Bernie Sanders is attacked by Donald Trump and is told that he's crazy Bernie and is a communist, what do you call those? Are those not attacks? Are those just friendly jabs? Again, you're really crafting a reality that you want to live in that's not true, that's not representative of the world that we're all living in. Now, he goes on to explain why attacks on Bernie Sanders will be particularly effective in a general election, and he cites push polling as an example. He states, "First, the caller asks the voter which candidate he's planning to support. Then she reads talking points from each candidate and asks the question again. Then she tries out some pro-Clinton and anti-Sanders messages. Next, you're going to hear some statements that someone could make about Bernie Sanders that says, after each one, please tell me how much it concerns you. One statement is Bernie Sanders is making big campaign promises that will cost up to $20 trillion. The New York Times said his plans are not realistic. Other independent experts said his plans are unworkable and dead on arrival in Congress. Another statement is Bernie Sanders' plan is to replace Obamacare and put all Americans into a whole new healthcare system. His plan would force 70% of Americans to pay more for healthcare through higher taxes. Sanders himself has said he will raise taxes." Right, that's called push polling, and he's actually explaining a real-life scenario where pro-Clinton push pollers had called people to see how they can influence the vote against Bernie Sanders, and there's a reason why this is banned in many states. It's because it's misleading. George W. Bush actually push-polled against John McCain and was asked, would you be less or more likely to support John McCain if you knew that he fathered an illegitimate son that was black? And that worked. That was effective. So many states ban the practice because it's just wrong and unethical. So yes, of course, if you lie about a candidate and he or she can't defend themselves, then that may be influential on voters. But the fact of the matter is that in a general election, if Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders are debating and Trump says, look, your policies are going to cost $20 trillion, well, Bernie Sanders can defend himself and say, no, that's a lie. Even though it's the case that I will raise taxes, Voters will save money, on average $5,000 more per year, because they won't be paying for these ridiculous health insurance premiums. And furthermore, Donald Trump's policies will cost even more. How much do you think it'll cost to build the wall? So there have been attacks against Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, but what's been proven time and again is that the attacks against Hillary Clinton are more effective than they are against Bernie Sanders, because she's sinking in the polls. I don't know why we can't take that into account. But he continues, he says, basically, if you were designing the perfect target for Republicans, a candidate who proudly links socialist economics to hippie culture, libertinism, left-wing foreign policy, new age nonsense, and contempt for bourgeoisie values, you'd create Bernie Sanders. Clinton could have attacked these weaknesses in the primary. Her supporters had an opposition research file on Sanders' associations with communism, but she didn't. In a general election, Republicans wouldn't hesitate. Would a GOP assault along these lines hurt Sanders? Absolutely. Sanders' explicit socialism would help Republicans broaden this critique into an all-out scare campaign about a government takeover. So you're literally arguing that Bernie Sanders is a bigger target than Hillary Clinton, someone who's being investigated by the FBI, who is historically unfavorable, who lies compulsively. That's someone who's not the bigger target for Republicans than Bernie Sanders, who they're just going to reinvoke the Red Scare, who many people who would come out to support Bernie Sanders, young people, didn't grow up during the time when there was this communist Red Scare, so it's not going to resonate with them. You think that Bernie Sanders is a bigger target than Hillary Clinton? So he claims that Republicans will hammer away at the increased tax point, and they'll also fearmonger about the increasing size of government under Bernie Sanders. But newsflash, they're going to do that under Hillary Clinton as well. They're already calling her a socialist. They called Obama a communist. Do you really think it's going to be any different? Really? Now, finally, he cites polls that actually disprove his point, but he states that even though it's the case that a majority of citizens support a single-payer healthcare system, they support free college tuition, he says that when you reframe those polls correctly so, it is the case that people become less inclined to support those policies if they know that their taxes will go up. You tell us don't believe the polls. So why should we only believe the polls that prove your point and then disregard the ones that don't prove your point? It doesn't make sense. Now, he also contends that voters will be more supportive of this incremental approach that Hillary Clinton puts forth, because everyone gets so excited when they say, we're just going to have the same status quo politics, even though income inequality is getting historically high. I'm going to be incremental. I'm going to be Obama's third term. Ooh, how exciting. I can't wait to get out and vote for that. That's not what excites people. Bernie Sanders excites people because he's actually proposing systemic change. Incremental change is not exciting. People are not going to get out to vote for the same exact thing they've had for the last 8 years. So it is the case that Bernie Sanders has been attacked by the mainstream media and Republicans, and in spite of this, he still polls better than Donald Trump in hypothetical matchups than Hillary Clinton. So your argument is wrong. It's invalid. You're also not accounting for the excitement that Bernie Sanders generates. You're not accounting for the fact that he gets the youth vote to come out. The youth vote helped carry Obama into the White House in both 2008 and 2012. If they're not excited, if they're not going to come out to vote for Hillary Clinton, as is indicated by the primary process, what makes you think that these polls are lying? And furthermore, you're also underestimating the Bernie or bust movement. When we say we're Bernie or bust, we're saying we're not going to support Hillary Clinton. We may vote for Jill Stein, but I will not cast a vote for Hillary Clinton. Now, it may be the case that many Bernie Sanders supporters switch, but even if just a fraction don't actually come out and are really Bernie or bust like they say, that's detrimental for Hillary Clinton, and it will cost her the White House. Now, also, I loved that you claimed Bernie Sanders is an explicit socialist, and then he links to Bernie Sanders' page where he explains what democratic socialism is. Democratic socialism is not explicit socialism. Those are not equal things. We are one of the few countries in the world that don't actually have a social democratic party. Canada has a social democratic party. Are they an explicitly socialist country? Germany has a social democratic party. Are they socialists? Times are changing. The word socialism is not a boogeyman word that doesn't scare us. It may scare you, but that doesn't resonate with us. Now, here's the thing. We don't know if Hillary Clinton's poll numbers will improve or change with time. We don't know that. But we do know that Bernie Sanders has consistently beat Donald Trump in hypothetical matchups and has always outperformed Hillary Clinton against Republicans, with the exception of Carly Fiorina, who Hillary Clinton outperformed Bernie Sanders by a fraction of a percent against. So, yeah, Hillary Clinton is less electable than Bernie Sanders, and that's partially because he can pull in a lot of independents, but it's also contingent on the fact that he doesn't have historically high unfavorability ratings like Hillary Clinton does. It's also in part due to the fact that Bernie Sanders is not undergoing a criminal investigation for Hillary Clinton. She broke the Federal Records Act. That's what the State Department audit shows, and yet you think that it's crazy that she would be a smaller target for Republicans than Bernie Sanders. I find this ridiculous. Look, you don't get to tell people to disagree with the polls because you don't like them, because you have cognitive dissonance because your candidate is losing against Donald Trump. You don't get to do that. Polls are polls. You don't get to cite polls when they prove your point and then tell us to ignore them when they disprove your point. So, of course, it's the case that someone who is disliked by both parties is a weaker general election candidate than Bernie Sanders, but please keep making this false argument because it just makes you look ridiculous.